Have you ever wanted to chat with AI, create amazing images, or transcribe audio on your Mac? Today we're exploring the tools that make it possible while keeping your business data entirely private and without requiring an internet connection. Stay tuned as we dive into Ollama, DiffusionBee, and Macwhisper. You'll discover what you can do with them, their advantages, and any limitations that you should be aware of. By the end of this episode, you will know more about local AI tools for Mac than most solopreneurs. So using AI directly from a web browser or through an API, application programming interface, is great. However, despite the security measures put in place by the AI providers, data still needs to be processed by a third-party server, and therefore our AI usage is not 100% private, even if it's not used to further train the AI model. And so the solution to this problem is very simple, using AI tools that can run locally on a Mac without needing an internet connection. This is especially useful when needing help involving proprietary information. The goal here is not to replace web-based AI tools, but rather to complement them in specific situations. The main reasons that we still need web-based AI tools come from the limitations of locally run ones. So, first limitation, AI models take several gigabytes of space, and then we often need to download multiple ones. So it means it requires a lot of hard disk space. AI requires also a lot of memory. 8 GB of memory is okay for image generation and for transcriptions, but it's the bare minimum for text generation. If you want to run a large language model with 13 billion parameters, you need at least 16 GB of RAM. And if you want bigger models or larger models, you need more than that. On top of that, AI tools require powerful processors, especially GPUs, so the graphical processing units. And so we usually get much better performance on Apple Silicon Macs than on Intel-based Macs. And because to get better accuracy we need larger models, it also requires more resources, so more storage, more memory, and more compute power. Now, with that in mind, let's explore a local tool that can do text generation, and that is called Ollama, O-L-L-A-M-A. It's a free tool that can run open source large language models. The name comes from Llama 2, L-L-A-M-A 2, which is an open source model that was released by Meta in July 2023. It's an alternative to ChatGPT, to Google Bard, Bing Chat, and Claude, and it's a lightweight method to download and run a bunch of open source models. Obviously Llama 2, but Meta released also another one called Code Llama, which has been trained on coding and programming stuff. But then there is a French startup that created another one called Mistral, and that performs in some situations better than Llama 2. And then you have OpenChat, Orca. So the open source community regarding large language models is really a vibrant one. Now, in terms of interface, Ollama provides the bare minimum because Ollama is basically a menu bar application that runs in the background all the time to check for updates. And if you see the icon in the menu bar, it just confirms that Ollama and the models that you will install can be run. There is no user interface for Ollama at all. The basic way to interact with Ollama and to chat with the models is through the terminal. This is usually what we use as developers or when we want to run terminal commands on our Mac. Now, the big disadvantage is that you don't have any chat history, so you need to copy-paste all the time. And yes, it's not super user-friendly. So this is why there are other methods to interact with the models that have been downloaded with Ollama. And one way is through a RayCast extension. So if you remember, RayCast is a launcher like Spotlight. And so you can install an extension called Ollama AI. It's totally free. The advantage also of this extension is you can manage models. So you can delete models. If you want to pull models, you can do that as well. You have a chat history and it comes with built-in presets. So like I explained in episode 72, you can fix spelling, you can translate, you can rephrase, you can change the tone, and you can improve writing. Usually what happens is that you select the text and you copy it in the clipboard. Then you invoke RayCast. You look for the Ollama AI action that you want to perform. You press Command Enter, and then it will perform the action. The big disadvantage of this method is that a conversation is just one prompt and one answer. There is no follow-up possible. So if you want a longer conversation with the chatbot, either you use the terminal, or if you have a Mac running macOS 14 Sonoma, then you can use an application called Ollamac. So it's like Ollama with a C at the end. So it's a native Mac application. It has a full chat history. It's very easy to copy-paste the output as well. Now, I've tested it and I noticed that it is still buggy at the time of recording. For instance, when I put a prompt, the first response was blank or one letter. So I needed to paste the prompt again, ask it a second time, and then it gave me an answer. So if you have a Mac running at least Sonoma, Ollamac is the most user-friendly way to interact with the models. You can't download models with that application, at least at the moment, but you can interact with the models. And then there is another method which is called Chatbot Ollama, and this is a web interface that looks a lot like ChatGPT. So if you're familiar with ChatGPT, you will recognize the interface. When preparing for this episode, my daughter came in my office, looked at the screen and said, "Oh, ChatGPT." And I said, "No, it's not ChatGPT, it's Chatbot Ollama." But yeah, it looks so much like ChatGPT that if you're used to ChatGPT on this interface, you will love then Chatbot Ollama. It offers chat history. You can even create your own library of prompts on the right side and then reuse them easily. For every conversation, you can configure a system prompt, so some information that will be used as a context if you want. And you can even configure how much creativity you give the model for each separate conversation. Now, the downside of Chatbot Ollama is that it requires developer tools like Homebrew, Git, NPM. So if you're a techie or if you're experienced with the terminal, and when I say the word Homebrew, you understand completely what I mean, then I recommend to go with Chatbot Ollama. If you have no clue what Homebrew means, I would say don't necessarily go that way. So the big advantages, obviously, of a tool like Ollama for the local chatbot capabilities is that you can use it totally offline and is 100% private. The open source community around large language models is very active. So there are new models that come constantly. And something I didn't mention yet is that it's possible to create a custom model via a text file. So it's called model file, and in that model file you specify the AI model that you want. So let's say Llama 2 with 13 billion parameters. You can configure another parameter called temperature. It's the amount of creativity that you give the model, and then you can give it some text that will be the context of that model. So one way is to define, for instance, your ideal customer avatar, how you can best serve them, and you include all the relevant information about your business, about the products and services that you offer, and then basically you create your own GPT. And it's very similar actually to the GPT's functionality that OpenAI introduced and that requires a ChatGPT Plus subscription. Now, the limitations and the disadvantages of Ollama is that most of the open source models that you can download today, their knowledge is limited to 2021 or 2022. And so it's best to always start by asking the model, what is your world knowledge cutoff date? And then it will tell you, okay, it's October 2021 or something like that. Another limitation is that those models do not have direct access to the internet, so they can't fetch information. If you give them a URL, they won't open and look what is behind the URL. And also, it's very resource hungry. So I've used it both on my 2020 iMac with an Intel processor, and even though it has 40 gigabytes of RAM, it's super slow. And on the flip side, I used it also on my MacBook Pro, which has only 16 gigs of RAM, but an M2 Pro chip, and there it's 2 times faster than on the iMac. Okay, so now let's turn our attention to image generation, and the tool that I recommend using is called DiffusionBee. It's a totally free tool, and it allows to run open source image generation models locally on a Mac. So the name DiffusionBee comes from Stable Diffusion. It's an open source model that was released by Stability AI in August 2022. It's an alternative to DALL-E, Midjourney, and Adobe Firefly. Now, the application is about 600 megabytes, but after the first launch, it will download roughly 5 gigabytes worth of models. It has a simplified user interface compared to other web-based tools that are trickier to install. And the current official version is version 1.7.4, downloadable directly from the website. It's available for both Intel-based and Apple Silicon Macs, and it's compatible also with macOS Monterey. Now, the main functionalities of version 1.7.4 is that it offers traditional text to image generation. So you have a prompt area where you explain what you want. You can choose models, you can define different parameters. You have also the possibility to define what we call negative prompts, which are the things that we don't want in the picture. Then we have also image to image. So you give it an existing photo or an existing image and a prompt, and it will use both the prompt and the image to create your new image. Then you can do in-painting. So basically you have an existing image or the result of a text-to-image generation. And then you will highlight certain parts of the image, and with the prompt, you will ask the model to modify that part of the image. That's called in-painting. And then you have out-painting. So you give it an image, and the prompt is all about what's outside the image. So if you have a square image, you can make it portrait mode, you can make it landscape, you can add stuff using AI. Then we have what is called ControlNet. And with ControlNet, you use a second image and a second AI neural network to control the output. And so, for instance, you can give it a picture of a person with a certain pose. And the control net, which is a special kind of neural network, will analyze that image and realize, the legs are crossed, the arms are crossed, the person is looking on the left or looking on the right or something like that. And then it will create like a wireframe diagram linking the head, the arms, the legs, and use that information, the pose of the person, to guide the generation of the image afterwards. It's a nice trick if you want to create an image of a person in a certain position or pose. And the final thing that it can do is provide a history of all your prompts with a small thumbnail for each image. And you have everything. So you have not only the prompt, but also which model you used, what was the size of the picture, what were all the parameters that you wanted for the image generation. And there is even a search box, so you can quickly find a previous image that you generated. Now, at the time of recording, there is a technical preview of version 2 of DiffusionBee. It's still in beta. And the improvements that are already implemented is the ability to manage and download models directly from the application. With version 1.7.4, you need to go on a website, download the models, import the models afterwards. But hopefully with version 2, it will be easier to do that. The developer has already foreseen new features, but they are not activated yet. So it will be possible in the future to train a model on our own images. So basically create our own stable diffusion model. And video creation will also be implemented in the future in the application. And so what are the big advantages of DiffusionBee? Well, it's very easy to install. The interface is super simple, and compared to tools like DALL-E and Midjourney and others, those tools, they have put restrictions in place to prevent reusing known persons or known characters. And so I tried to create a Star Wars character directly from ChatGPT-4 with DALL-E 3, and I got the message telling me, sorry, I can't do that because it's reusing things that are copyrighted. Well, with a tool like DiffusionBee and an open source model, you can mention the words Star Wars, Pixar, you can put the names of actors and actresses and use that in your prompt. What makes tools like DiffusionBee not so good is that it's very slow on Intel machines. So it's really better to have a Apple Silicon Mac with an M1 chip, M2 chip, or M3 chip. There is a competitor to DiffusionBee, and it's a web user interface developed by a company called Automatic 11111. And so I've tried both, and yes, I must admit the web UI from Automatic offers much more capabilities than DiffusionBee. But at the same time, it's much easier to install DiffusionBee than the web UI of Automatic. Again, you need Homebrew, you need the terminal to install this. There is also quite a steep learning curve regarding prompting. So creating effective image generation prompts, it's not easy. So for that, I will put links at the top of the blog post, links to a website called Stable Diffusion Art, and they have a prompt guide. So I will put the link to that so that you can learn how to prompt Stable Diffusion. And on another website called Art Hub AI, you can filter images that have been created with DiffusionBee. So those pictures have been tagged DiffusionBee. If you look at those, what you get is you not only get the picture that was generated with DiffusionBee, but you also have the prompt, the model, and all the parameters. So if you see images that you like, you can then easily learn from those images and reproduce the prompts and make some variations on the prompt. Now, the last thing about DiffusionBee is that it's very easy to fall into a rabbit hole. For a presentation, I wanted to have the DeLorean from Back to the Future flying over Luxembourg City. And I spent at least an hour trying to get a photorealistic picture. And it was not easy. And so that's maybe the opposite of efficiency in that case. Let's now look at the last tool for transcriptions called Macwhisper. It's a freemium tool, meaning that there is a free version with some limitations. And then if you purchase a pro license, then you can do more. The name comes from Whisper, which is an open source speech recognition model that was released by OpenAI in September 2022. The particularity of Whisper and Macwhisper is that it understands 100 languages and it can do translation directly within the tool. So you can give it audio in English, let's say, it will transcribe it in English and then translate it in French and in any of the 100 languages that it knows. The free version of Macwhisper comes with two models called Tiny and Base. They are not the most accurate, obviously they are the least accurate models, but it's very quick to do transcription. So if you imagine 1 minute of audio is done in 2 seconds with the Tiny model and in 4 seconds with the Base model. So it's very, very quick. Now, if you want better accuracy in terms of transcription, then you need the paid version, which offers 3 models, one called Small, another Medium, and the last one Large. The more the accuracy, also the slower it is to do the transcription. So the Large model, for instance, does not offer any speed up whatsoever. So if you have a video of 1 hour, it will take 1 hour to transcribe. It will be super good quality, but obviously it will take a lot of time. It is available from Gumroad, from the developers page. I will put a link also at the top of the blog post. But the author has put also a version on the Mac App Store. So if you search for Whisper transcription, you will find the same application. And to go from the free version to the paid version, it's an in-app purchase from the Mac App Store. There is a requirement for Macwhisper, it's macOS 13 Ventura. So how do you use it? You can directly record into the app. You click on a button, it uses the microphone, you speak, and it does the transcription on the fly. You can give it a URL, for instance, a YouTube link or a Vimeo link, and it will then do the transcription using the URL. You can give it an existing file, so it understands audio files like MP3, WAV, M4A, and also video files. It understands MOV and MP4. So you can take a voice memo, drag and drop it on top of the interface, and then it will give you a transcription of your voice memo. To do batch processing, drag and dropping multiple files at once, requires the paid version. And the same goes with podcast mode. So if you use Zoom to record your podcast, it's possible to configure Zoom so that each speaker has its own audio file. The transcribe podcast option will then automatically assign the speaker names and position the text for each speaker. And then another feature that requires the paid options is the ability to transcribe the system audio from macOS. So whatever sound or music is on your Mac will be transcribed, or you can even choose an individual application. In terms of output, you can generate text files, so TXT files, docx, so Word documents, CSV, PDF. But if you need subtitles, for instance, for YouTube or for Vimeo, it generates the SRT files and the VTT format. So it generates both. So what are the big advantages of Macwhisper? It's lightweight. The application doesn't take much space. It's multilingual, and it's very easy to download the desired models. It's from within the interface. You go to the settings part of the interface and you can download the models. Now, the disadvantages of Macwhisper, it's related to the pricing model, right? So if you want advanced features like batch mode, for instance, it requires purchasing a license key. But apart from that, it's a very good application. So to recap, I have explored 3 AI tools that can help you generate text, images, and transcriptions locally on your Mac without an internet connection and thus keeping your business data private. These tools run faster on your Macs equipped with Apple Silicon chips, and even then it's recommended to have at least 16 GB of RAM and be able to allocate 50 to 100 GB of storage to store the models. Now, talking specifically about large language models, the quality of the output may be inferior to the latest versions of ChatGPT or Claude, but it's the price to pay at the moment to guarantee 100% privacy. And when it comes to image generation, my experience tells me that the integration of DALL-E 3 inside ChatGPT 4 drastically reduces the need to learn good image prompting techniques. And therefore, if you quickly need an image, a tool like DiffusionBee might not be the best option. However, if you want to experiment and in the near future, if you want to train your own model with your images, then DiffusionBee is the right tool to install on your Mac and then start learning how to use it. And finally, on the transcription front, Macwhisper is, in my opinion, a must-have AI tool, especially if you're not using the script. So you can copy-paste YouTube links, drag and drop voice memos, and you can even transcribe Zoom meetings on the fly. Now, I purchased a Pro license simply because the batch transcription mode is a great time saver. If you've never used any of the tools that I've covered today, I hope this episode has motivated you to start experimenting with at least one of them. And if you've already started, I'm curious to know what specific use cases have helped you so far. You can DM me on Instagram. My handle is MacPreneur.fm. In the next episode, I will explore different ways that we can use AI to generate content ideas. So that's it for today. If you haven't done it yet, visit macpreneur.com/AI to grab your own copy of the Top 10 AI Tools cheat sheet. This PDF will give you the edge that you need to boost your solo business in this fast-pacing world. Once again, it's macpreneur.com/AI. And until next time, I'm Damien Schreurs, wishing you a great day.
Thank you for watching the Macpreneur podcast. If you've enjoyed the show, please leave a comment and share it with a friend right now.